Remember, if you like this video, don't forget to press the subscribe button and press the notification bell so you will be alerted to when I have new videos.
Welcome to another episode of Mach Fishing. In this episode, I will have a fascinating two-part interview with a good friend of mine, otherwise known as Nomadic Fanatic, as he goes on a quest to fish around the world. Welcome, YouTubers. Happy New Year's. This will be my first video of 2023, and I wanted to introduce you to someone before they go on an epic adventure. This guy's named Harry, and he's a kayak angler. And the reason I'm, introducing him to you is because he was the first kayaker I ever met when I started kayaking. After I bought my Tarpon 120, I was at work and I went on a on site on a project where I had to set up a network. And some of the folks there found out that I do kayak fishing. They've never met anyone else that did kayak fishing, neither have I, and wanted to introduce me to this guy named Harry. So I went over to his cube. He wasn't there, but I did see he had a picture of like some fish he caught, and there was a kayak in the background. We did eventually meet, and we ended up fishing together. He actually showed me how to jig for perch. I used to use the worm and hook method, and he showed me how to use artificial lures with that. Ever since then, we've been friends. I've been visiting him in North Carolina from time to time. We've always been in touch, and every time he comes to Maryland, we try to make time to get together. I had a orange Tarpon 120, great paddling boat. I loved it. And Harry kind of took me under his wings and took me to some places in North Carolina and other places where we went fishing. With Harry, I actually caught my record number of keeper flounders back in the day. I think I caught like 22 flounders. Back then you can keep like 8 or something like that. Not anymore, but that was an epic day of fishing. Well, anyway, Harry, he decided since he retired, he's going to fish the world. I think he's known online as Fishing Fanatic. And so far, he's already fished all around the United States. He's went down the East Coast, West Coast, the Gulf. He's gone down to Belize in Mexico. He's gone up to Canada and Alaska. So now that he's covered all 50 states, he travels around, camps out in a van. He's now going on an epic journey he's planning. He's leaving in 2 weeks. He's heading to Australia and perhaps Fiji. Anyway, I'm heading over to his house to do the interview. So why don't you come on along and we'll get to talk to Harry and talk about his adventures. And I'll include some pictures of some of the fish he's caught over the last year or two while he was fishing the world. That's what he says. And he is really going to fish the world because he's going to Fiji and Australia next. I have to go meet up with Harry around 11 o'clock, so let's go. I'm on my way to see Harry. I'm about 30 minutes away, so I should be there shortly. All right, so I finally made it over to, I call him Kayak Harry. I'm over here to just do a quick interview because he's going on this epic trip. I'm part of his Fish the World tour. He's already finished, like I mentioned earlier, that he finished the covering the US, Canada, Belize, So now he's going to apparently Hawaii also, and Fiji, and looks like, where else are you going? To the main one, Australia.
Australia.
Yeah, so there you go. So.
Yeah.
All right, Harry. So your epic trips. How do you travel around the U.S. first? How do you travel around here to do all this fishing?
Basically, the U.S. was me launching my personal quest, and my personal quest is to fish the world.
Okay.
So I wanted to start with my home turf, which is North America.
Okay.
So, and when I say fish the world, it's largely, my style. I'm not a big freshwater guy, although I do some freshwater.
It's brackish and
It's
salt water.
largely tidal water, salt water that I'm talking about. And my big preference for fishing is slow, skinny, and light, which to me means I want to go slow. I don't want to be racing around in a power boat to 20 different spots. I want to get in my kayak, take my time, explore the area. I want to do skinny water, which means usually 4 feet or less of water is where I'm catching almost all of my fish. And then, not true on the West Coast, but true most places. And true to some extent on the West Coast too. And then, so skinny, and then light. I want to go light tackle. So I don't want to use a lot of heavy offshore gear. You know, I'm not trying to catch tunas and marlins or anything like that. I'm basically trying to catch inshore fish using light tackle.
Are you using braid, mono?
Yeah, you know, I have what I call my trout rod and my drum rod, because I'm from the Outer Banks, so those are the two big species there.
Okay.
And you know, the drum rod being a little bit sturdier, a little heavier, but still an inshore rod. And that's a Bass Pro, and then the other one is a St. Croix. That's kind of my go-to rod. And then you know, the nice Shimano reels, the 2500s.
Okay.
2,000 to 3,000, anywhere in that range.
10 pound, 15, 20?
Yeah,
What's your favorite?
Yeah, pretty much. Usually go with 15-pound test braided line. And then what I've learned over time is you definitely want to upgrade your leader.
Okay. And
so I've been going to 20 pound. I might even upgrade that a little bit more.
But
I'm afraid about. I don't want leader shy fish. You know, like a bonefish or something like that to be spooked off, or trout to be spooked off by heavier fluorocarbon leader. But I go with fluorocarbon leader.
Okay.
And it's usually 20 pound now.
So 20 pound there.
That's
and
where
15
I've
pound
settled.
of the braided.
Right. Okay. And I've caught, you know, probably on this North American leg of my quest, which took me 3 years. I did the East Coast 1 year. 2018, I did the East Coast. 2019, I did the Gulf Coast.
Okay.
The East Coast basically was from the Dry Tortugas, which is
you went to the Dry Tortugas.
Right off the tip of Florida. Very few people know about it. My number one place to fish in the world so far, by the way,
is the Dry
Tortugas. It's a fantastic fishing there.
Okay.
Highly recommend it. So from the Dry Tortugas all the way up to Quebec, Canada.
Wow.
And so I basically covered the whole East Coast.
And you did Alaska too, right?
Did almost every state in the United States on the East Coast. And that was the East Coast leg. Then the Gulf Coast leg was basically from Belize around to Texas, Louisiana.
Wow.
And then most of the Gulf Coast of Florida, which is they have a considerable coastline along the Gulf as well. So that was the Gulf Coast. Unfortunately, I had to skip Mexico on the Gulf Coast. So I still have not done the Mexican Gulf Coast. But I did hit Belize, which I guess technically isn't on the Gulf, but it's still, you know, down in that area. And that was a lot of fun. But caught my biggest tarpon ever there. But on the West Coast, I did from basically the tip of the Baja Peninsula in Mexico all the way up to Anchorage, Alaska area.
Wow.
The Kenai Peninsula, basically.
There must have been a lot of planning for that.
Enormous planning. Hundreds of hours of planning required to pull this off. And then when you get there, you change all your plans. Almost.
You were driving. I think you car camped a lot, right? And stayed at campsites.
Right. Yeah.
And you were driving down to. You were going to drive to Belize at one point? I couldn't remember.
I was planning to drive
and something
through
happened.
Mexico and fish Mexico, and then go on to Belize and drive to Belize from there, because, you know, how do you get a kayak down there?
Right.
That's one of the big issues. I'm a kayak fisherman, by the way. So that slow part of my fishing mantra is out of a kayak.
Right.
Yeah. So that slows me down intentionally. But so, getting a kayak is the big major challenge of this quest, really, more than anything. Because now I face that in Australia.
Right.
How am I going to transport a kayak to Australia? I could get an inflatable. I've seriously considered it a dozen times. I'm still thinking about it.
Like
a little
those Hobie inflatables.
Hobie inflatable. There's a whole range of them now available.
Yeah.
And you can get those on a plane. I mean, you can take it on a plane, pack it up in a bag, and take it on a plane.
I've heard of people doing that
And
when they go to Florida.
The big issue I have with it though is I fish a lot of reef areas, like in Baja, for instance, and Belize. Reefs everywhere.
Oh,
right.
Sharp, damaging to the kayak.
Yeah,
possibly.
I mean, I run into a reef. I'm in the middle of nowhere in some cases. I mean, out in Belize, I was fishing Glover's Atoll. It's 20 miles off the coast. There's nothing out there. I mean,
well, back to Belize.
If I get stranded out on a reef,
right,
on Glover's Atoll, what the hell am I going to do?
And what you do about the kayak in Belize? You were saying that you were going to drive down to Belize, but then.
Right. Yeah. So I would have had a hard kayak down there that I had transported, but I couldn't do it. So I never did drive there. It turned out that Mexico, and I was telling you this before the interview, is that every time I've gone to leave for this trip, I've run into major obstacles. It's never been easy. So let that be an encouragement to anybody who watches this.
Right.
Is like, you're going to face challenges, significant challenges. I had a car break on me a week before I was scheduled. It completely melted down. I had to get a new car in a week.
Right.
Which included a kayak rack. And I had to do that in a week's time when I did the East Coast. And then when I went to do the Pacific Coast, I had an automobile accident and somebody totaled my vehicle and broke my rib a week before I was scheduled to leave. And now this year, I'm getting eye floaters, which can alarm the heck out of me because I've never had them in my life. And I can still see them. I mean, I see them right now. But they're floating around on my eye, and I'm freaking out, thinking, "Oh no, do I have a detached retina? What's going on?"
Exactly.
And so I went to the ophthalmologist, and he cleared me.
Okay.
And he said I could fly, so I'm going forward. I'm leaving in 2 weeks.
What you doing with the kayak and vehicle and everything over there? You're obviously not flying your kayak.
that like I was saying, that's the big challenge. Is how do you get the kayak where you're going? Well, in the case of Australia. Number one, I'm stopping in Hawaii on the way. I'm going to stay there for about a week. I want to scope out the fishing in Hawaii. I'm probably not going to do a lot of fishing while I'm there because I'm only going to be there for 8 days.
Right.
But I'll scope things out, maybe do a little fishing, and then maybe hit it harder on the way back. I don't know yet. Okay. I got to figure that out. I have a pretty open-ended itinerary, so I've got that flexibility.
You'll be gone for how long?
I'm going to be gone for about 8 months.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm leaving in mid-January. I'm coming back in mid-October. I guess that's 9 months. So I'm going to be in Australia, though, for about 8, I figure. It might be 7. I don't know. I'm going to figure that out. If I want to add a big Fiji leg on the way home, then, maybe I'll stay in Australia for 7 months. I've got plenty of flexibility. I don't have return flights yet, so I can schedule that at a later date. And I don't have any commitments here at all.
So financially, you saved up a lot of money for this trip so you can buy a plane ticket when you're ready on the way back? Because you're not like working while you're over there or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, money-wise, it's interesting. I'm a cheapskate. I like to do everything as cheap as possible. And that's one reason it takes so much effort to plan these trips. For instance, when I did the East Coast, I was car camping. I was parking my car in a spot, setting up a tent, and then going fishing from my camp, and then coming back in the evening and cooking on a camp stove. And I was doing that in cheap campgrounds. I wasn't going to the expensive campgrounds either.
Right.
I found the cheapest campgrounds I could find. County campgrounds a lot of times are cheaper.
Okay, that's good to know.
National forest campgrounds often are cheaper. Hard to find along the coast, but they exist. And then national parks are cheap for me because I got the senior pass. So all
you
those
have to be for the senior pass.
You just have to. I think you have to be 60 or 62 or something.
Okay.
You might want to look into it. It's gone up since I bought it, but I got mine for $20, and I get half price at all national park camping.
That's great.
It's amazing. I mean, I've saved hundreds and hundreds of dollars with that when you can get the site reserved. So anyway, with all those tricks, I've been able to do this on the cheap. I stay at Airbnbs a lot. When I go to Hawaii, I'm going to stay at an Airbnb on Waikiki Beach for $40 a night.
Wow.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And
it's crazy.
You found this already?
I found that on Airbnb. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, and then when I go to Australia, I'm going to stay at an Airbnb that has a swimming pool, full kitchen privileges, a beautiful room, Wi-Fi, Amazon and Netflix on the big screen TV, et cetera, all that stuff.
So you'd be fishing in luxury
for $30 a night.
Air conditioned and everything.
Air conditioned, all of it.
I would imagine in Australia.
And that's for $30 a night. But I have a room, and I stay with a family, right?
Oh,
so
okay.
they're renting out one of their rooms, to visitors, and it's cheap. It's like $30 a night. But my main goal when I go to Sydney is find a vehicle.
Okay.
Because I want to drive around Australia with a kayak on my roof, just like I did North America. But I'm going to have to buy the kayak and buy the vehicle.
Okay.
Because I decided not to go inflatable kayak, right?
Okay.
Because of the reefs. I did not want to be out on a reef somewhere, puncture my kayak, and then have...
And you're doing this all by yourself, right?
And then
out
there.
No buddies or nothing with you.
And I'm solo, right? Yeah, so that limits me, right? The fact that I'm solo has prevented me from doing certain things that I would have done otherwise. If I had had a buddy in Baja, for instance, when I went I would have gone farther off the coast than the Sea of Cortez.
Okay.
For sure. Because you can get some nice yellowfin out there, fishing a couple miles out. And I just didn't want to do that solo. The winds whip up out there. You're in big seas like that. So it's too risky solo.
So what weather are you expecting on your future trips?
That's the thing. The weather is a huge issue. And on the West Coast, it was a particularly big challenge. Baja is extremely windy in February. It's the windiest month of the year. So it kept me off the water. I don't think I fished more than maybe 10 days in February down there. And then half of March is also very windy. But then by mid-March, the winds start dying down. But you've already lost 6 weeks by then, right? So I was in Baja for 6 weeks and maybe fished, 15, 20 times in 6 weeks. It sucked. But, I was able to gather information, learn a little bit of Spanish, do the stuff you need to do to survive. That's another challenge. Learn language, right? Because I'm not always going where English is spoken. I chose Australia because English is their language.
Right.
Kind of.
Right, exactly.
They sort of speak English. I'll learn their dialect.
Right.
But, so... I lost my train of thought. I forgot where we were.
Well, we're going to talk about what weather you're expecting.
Weather
in Australia when you go.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So in Australia, it's their summer right now. So that's one reason I was kind of chomping at the bit to get out of here because I'm stuck in the winter here. The water's 45 degrees. There ain't no fish out here.
Right.
So plus I got plenty to do anyway. Preparing for Australia. So it's summer and the fishing should be great down there right now. I'm hoping, especially in the southern part of the continent, because their southern part of everything's reversed. So the southern part of Australia is where it's going to be the most seasonably warm during the summer. You're not going to have the extreme humidities and stuff that you'll have in the northern part. The North Australia is like southern Florida. Think of Miami Beach, and now you've got what North Australia is kind of like, where the Everglades is kind of what it's like. Plus, you have the added challenge in Australia of the big crocs.
I was about to say, what are you going to do about these big crocs? These saltwater and freshwater crocs they have?
Right. They have the big saltwater crocs, and they swim out in the ocean. I've learned that they actually make their way over to Fiji occasionally. They will migrate. So these suckers don't mind just going open ocean, you know.
Right.
So, you know, that's going to be interesting. I'm going to rely on the locals to educate me.
Okay.
I want to know what they're doing, how they're doing it. I'm going to learn a ton. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to have a good solution to that problem. That's one reason why I'm thinking about going to Fiji a little bit sooner. Because Fiji doesn't have a giant croc problem. They just have an occasional stray croc come over. You know, it only takes one, but I'm not too worried about it. Let's put it that way. I can keep my eyes peeled. But, yeah, I'm going to learn a lot about crocs over there. I'm going to try to YouTube it some before I leave. I've got so much stuff to do, though. I got to tell you, I don't know if I'm going to have time while I'm here.
Right.
Maybe Hawaii or something I can do it. I don't know. I'm going to figure out the croc problem. And
is the water warm over there or cold?
Yeah. So, again, you know, the north of Australia, think of the Everglades, right? And the water's always warm in the Everglades. It's warm in the Everglades right now.
Okay.
You know, it's 80 degrees down there right
now.
And the water's probably 75 degrees.
So you don't need a dry suit
in Florida like that. Excuse me?
You don't need a dry suit or anything like that.
No, I don't think I'm going to need a dry suit. I have to figure out my gear too, what I'm going to bring. I've already decided I'm going to bring a lot of checked bags. It's going to cost me extra.
Right.
I looked into one of the things I had to research in preparation for this trip is how the heck do I get my gear over there?
Right.
Right.
Because with some airlines limit you to
does
like
it even
bags.
Does it make sense to like transport my kayak over to there? You know, that kind of. I wanted to at least check it out.
Right.
And when I started checking it out, it turns out that it's extremely expensive to ship, you know, a container or a partial container of stuff over there, or even a few crates, whatever. It's extremely expensive. You're talking over $1,000 to pretty much ship, you know, a couple 100 pounds of stuff over there.
Right.
So no, you do not want to ship a kayak over there.
Okay.
I don't think that's a cost of cheapskate way to do it.
Right.
So, you know, I want to do it cheaply. So I'm just going to buy the kayak when I'm there and then sell it when I leave and then hope everything works out.
Because you're going to buy new, I guess.
I think I'll buy the kayak new because they're very hard. Hobies are really, they go like that. Right? I mean,
have you identified some Hobie dealers?
Yes,
that are there?
I have. There are Hobie dealers in Australia.
Have you been in contact
sell
with
pedal
them?
drive kayaks? No, I have not.
It'd be good to send them an email. I would.
It would. It's another thing on my list.
Another thing to do. If you guys don't know, Harry's staying in his house that he's staying in temporarily, and he has a laptop with a whole bunch of information on that. He's still going. He's been doing it all week.
Oh yeah, I build a spreadsheet for each trip. I lay out a bunch of places I think I'll stop, you know, and then I'll reserve some of them if I have to. What I learned on the East Coast is you don't want to make a bunch of reservations months in advance.
Okay.
If you do that, it's going to change. You're going to lose money on some of those reservations.
Okay.
And then also you might get stuck. So, for instance, when I did the East Coast, I fished Long Island. And I got to tell you, it's probably the worst place for a kayak fisherman can go is Long Island, New York. Don't waste your time. Don't go anywhere near Long Island, New York, because access to the water is so tightly restricted there.
Oh, okay.
It's very hard to get your kayak on the water on Long Island, New York, unless you want to pay hundreds of dollars for a beach access fee. You know, out-of-state beach access.
Wow.
So, you know,
that's true.
I wasn't willing, you know, and that gives you access to one particular beach. So you got to buy a bunch of them. So you're talking, you know, hundreds of dollars to get on the water in Long Island, New York. It's a pain in the butt. And then the fishing ain't that great once you're on the water, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
From my experience.
And the license and all that stuff. You had to deal with the licenses for all the different locations you went to, right?
Yeah, now New York's fishing license is great. It's free.
Right, but I mean the other places you've been to, California.
Yeah, I bought licenses all up and down all the coast, all the way around all the coasts.
So that's part of your expenses.
I'll let you in on a secret. The most expensive fishing licenses are California and Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah, California's was about $160 for me because I had to add an ocean pass on there, which wasn't a lot. But it was like $150 for the basic license, saltwater license there. And then Oregon is about the same. And then by the time you add the tag for king salmon, because you do have a shot at a king salmon, and if you want to keep it, you better pay for the tag. By the time you add all that, it's like $180.
Wow.
For that license. British Columbia, by comparison, was only about $100 for me. And I'm out of country.
Right.
And then Alaska was pretty much about $100 for everything. So even those two were cheaper. Don't waste your time. In my opinion, on the West Coast, skip the lower 48. Just do Baja and then jump up to British Columbia and Alaska. And that's the best fishing on the West Coast for a kayak fisherman, for sure. Okay. I don't know anything about the power boaters or whatever.
But you told me the water, they have great tidal flows,
maybe
right?
Shore fishing. I did see some guys shore fishing in both states, but for kayak fishing, it's not that great.
I think you told me the tidal flows were real dramatic.
Yeah, on the West Coast, especially in California and Oregon, getting on tidal water with a kayak is extremely risky. It's very dangerous for the most part.
Right.
The only exception to that is the San Francisco Bay Area. There's a couple of estuaries there. Of course, San Francisco Bay is an estuary.
Right.
So that, at certain places, parts of that are very accessible, or I don't know about very accessible. They're accessible and they're not dangerous. There aren't huge tidal flows there.
Right.
And then also Morro Bay, which unfortunately I never got to fish. And then there's a few other bays and stuff in there too, where you can fish in Northern California. But other than those estuaries, it's super dangerous. Big tidal flows, big surf, heavy movement of the water, lots of wind most of the time.
What are the tide differences you think you used to see?
They're like, in Oregon it was running like 8 to 10 feet typically.
You mean like it'd be low tide?
The tide. The tide varies.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
You can have a tidal flow of 5 feet from low to high in the morning, and then a tidal flow of 10 feet in the evening.
But that dramatic.
Yeah, but a lot of times it was usually between 5 and 10 feet in Oregon, for instance. That's a lot of tidal flow for a kayaker. If you're talking about a river, the mouth of a river, you're going to get swept out to sea if you're on an outgoing tide.
That's not good.
And then even on an incoming, you're going to be fighting it. Either way, it's not a very fun way to fish. So, and I'm a slow, skinny, light guy.
Right.
So I don't want to be big water, fighting all kind of tides and winds and stuff. I'm not an extreme kayaker. I'm not in this to be, set some kind of record or anything like that. I'm just on a quest to fish the whole world.
And Australia would be next. So in the U.S., you did primarily you did car camping and occasional Airbnbs or something like that, right? Car camping or campsites in the U.S.?
Yeah, almost all. The whole West Coast was pretty much car camping. So what I learned, and I'm very happy I learned this last year, is that it's 10 times easier to just sleep in your vehicle than it is to set up the tent. It's easier.
Which is why you have a minivan.
Yes. So I decided to go with a minivan. I totaled a vehicle, and then I had to replace it. So I went with the minivan and put a bed in it. And it worked out great. I couldn't be happier with that setup. There's shortcomings to a minivan. You don't have toilet facilities. Some people have a bucket, or whatever, but Who wants to take a dump in a bucket? Not me.
How did you manage that then?
You know.
Inquiring minds would like to know.
Holy cow! Do we really want to videotape this?
A lot of YouTubers always ask that question because
how do you take it? Well, the way I would take a dump is I would, a lot of days I would do it out on the water. You know, and I don't fish urban areas and stuff anyway.
Right.
I'm out in the wild. You know. And that's the other thing. I like very natural settings,
All right.
So the farther away from people, the better for me. I don't like crowds either when I'm fishing. So, if there's 50 guys going over here, I'm probably going to go over there.
Right.
And scope it out.
Okay.
Maybe all the fish are over there. It's possible. But I want to try this. It looks similar, right?
Right.
And the way I do it is by scoping it out. But anyway, if I go over here and it's very natural, and then, find a shoreline, hide behind a rock on the west coast, or up in the brush on the east and Gulf Coast.
Okay, all right.
And then, do your business, bring some extra, paper towels or something.
If you on the kayak or wherever you are.
Yeah, and then do your business. But, if you're, that was a big issue in Mexico because a lot of in Mexico, one thing I loved about Baja is it's super cheap to camp.
Okay.
And getting into the country is cheap. I mean, it doesn't cost much.
All right.
I think it costs like $50 or something to get an entry, visa for 6 months. So you can go down there and spend the whole winter down there for next to nothing, and then sleep in your van in a lot of places on the beach. Tecolote. Just go to Tecolote, park right on the beach, and then you got the Sea of Cortez out there, and and then you can launch your kayak right from the beach.
See you on the next episode of Mach Fishing as we continue on to part 2 of my interview with Harry on his adventure. Enjoy the sample pictures of his catch as he continues to fish the world.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you for watching, and until next time, be sure to check out my other videos.